This is going to be a process of pulling on a string and seeing where it goes. There's a lot of high-tech parts of this, and there's a lot of very low-tech parts of this. And one of the great fun things about this whole project is that I've made lots of friends in the process, and I'm very good at asking people to do things. So I get lots of volunteers. So hopefully this is on and I can skip through. So there are the books. You can see lots of aerial photographs and maps. Here's the waterproof chart series that I've produced. There's the Moondoggle book about Franklin Roosevelt. And here's Champlain's map. This is Samuel Champlain. So 1607, for us Americans, this is weird. We thought the whole North America gets settled with the Pilgrims in 1620. This is 13 years earlier than that. And this is the Annapolis River Valley in Nova Scotia. So up here, this is the Bay of Fundy. This is the Annapolis River Valley. This is what they call the habitation. This is where the French built the first European settlement in North America in 1605, 15 years before the Pilgrims. And over here, this is a little tributary, the Alains River, and there is our mill. There's a blow-up of it over there. You can see it's a modest little mill with an undershot water wheel. And so historians have all figured it's a very good map, but it's 1607. It was produced with a compass and a measuring stick and nothing more. So this is wilderness. This is absolute, complete wilderness. This is the first Europeans to set foot here. But they start building a settlement, and they build this mill. And historians have had a tough time. They've never found the habitation, and they've never found the mill. And so I said, I think it's a tide mill, and I think the map should get scaled and oriented this way, and all these various landmarks, I think it should be there. I think it should be in this section here. And there's the mill. I said it should be right there. I zoomed in on Google Earth, and there's a square something on the edge of the marsh. And I know from decades of looking at maps and coastline, you don't get squares in tide marshes unless they're man-made. So I got all excited. I called up the manager of Fort Anne National Park, which is a kilometer away, and I said, my understanding is no one's ever found the mill. He said, that's right. I said, has anybody ever looked over there? He said, no, that would be so cool. Don't touch anything. Apply for an archaeology reconnaissance permit, follow the process diligently, and good luck. So that's what I did. And by the way, I said, if that's there, then over there should be the fishing weir that Champlain shows us, and I found that too. So 3.5 years later, we've now identified 9 potential National Historic Sites, all within half a kilometer, all within this little teeny area, just outside of the very famous town of Annapolis Royal. But it's literally just outside, and this is where everything was happening. This is where they lived. This is where produced everything. So what's interesting here is that 4 of these sites are tide mills. So this mill, the mill, Pontreco's mill that we're looking at, that's on Champlain's map, it's the oldest tide mill. It's the oldest mill in North America, north of Spanish Mexico. So it's basically the beginnings of industrial power in North America is right here. We've got the oldest mill. It's a grist mill. It's driven by the tides. We also have Alains sawmill, which is a sawmill and a grist mill. It's probably the oldest sawmill in Canada, at least. So all of this is very, very cool. If everything goes right, we will start excavating this summer. But it's taken almost 4 years to get to that point. Because there are a lot of constituents to work on. There's tribal issues, there's national historic trust issues, et cetera, et cetera. But anyhow, it's great fun. And in that process, you pull on a string and another thing shows up. There's a windmill up there too, and it's really old. And they used it to pump water for the fort. And I didn't know anything about windmills at the time, so I got a book about windmills. And it's like, wow, that's old. And so this is interesting, that the really old mills are either mostly tide mills or windmills. And the reasons was that Europeans arrived on the coast. The coast is where you find tide marshes and tidal power. The coast is where you've got good breezes. That's why they built these things. The rivers were developed later. And one of the things that's really interesting, again, my graphics are a little funny here, but is that as I was reading about windmills, I discovered one in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, right near my house. So instead of 15-hour drive to get to Canada, it's 15 minutes away. This is very cool. My wife is very happy. There's things that I can do locally. So I go to Old Saybrook, and it looks remarkably like the same kind of environment that I'm dealing with up in Annapolis, Nova Scotia. And I go to that area where the windmill was because the book tells me that the millstones, the original millstones, are still there. It's like, oh, that's what that thing is. I've driven by it many times. I've never really paid attention to it. But there it is. And you can see there's the marsh in the background. And there's this really cool little plaque that says these are the original millstones. They were working for 175 years, and they're still here. But I've learned never to trust a bronze plaque. And that's because they lie. And I learned that by calling the Historical Society. And they said, no, that's not true. But we think we've got the original ones here, or at least maybe one of them. So come on, take a look. And we also have this great big pile of stuff. You're welcome to sort through it. So, okay, that's cool. I did. And it turns out there are 10 mills in Old Saybrook. I didn't know about any of these things. You're only seeing, I color-coded everything here so you could see it better. It's really unfortunate that it's not coming out very well. Because this is the one I wanted to show you. The first two are river-powered mills. The third and the fourth one are tide-powered mills. I didn't know we had enough tide in Old Saybrook. The only average is about 3 feet. And one of which is at Ox Pasture Dam. And it's like, where the hell is that? I've never heard of Ox Pasture. So I had to go figure this out, of course. The public records, some of the stuff I found in the Historical Society was the public records from the 1770s. And John Shipman of Old Saybrook is given permission to build a grist mill because for want of grist mills that will grind in the dry seasons of the year, those river mills, the little ones that they built early, were not very reliable because in the winter they froze and in the summer they dried out. Tide mills don't. That's one of the reasons why tide mills were so popular very early, because little mills were what everybody was using, little mills. They were very susceptible to droughts and floods. Tide mills aren't. So there's our reason why people build tide mills. And what's cool is it's a grist mill, but look at this, of a new and peculiar construction. So that, of course, got me interested. It's like, what's that mean? So I decided to go see if I could find this thing, because that's the references we have for this. And so I started looking, and it's like, well, here we are in so back up here, this is 1774 is the actual date for this quote. So I looked for the first map I could find afterwards, which is 1791. And we can see there are two river-powered mills up here, these two. This is where this is Oyster River right here. And there should be a tide mill right there, but it's not being shown. And this is one of the realities is any given map is a process of editing, so it may or may not show up. So there should be a tide mill right there. They don't show it. This is where the the windmill was. They don't show it. And here's another windmill that they do show. So you never know what's going to show up on any given map. So there we go. So here is 1811, and we do get the mill, the tide mill on Oyster River, but we still don't know where Ox Pasture is. But we find that on this map, which is from 1878, but look at it, it's a reconstruction map. It's not done at that time of that time. It's looking backwards in time. And so you can see it's got all kinds of things labeled, like here's the original road of 1639. Ox Pasture was established or termed in 1650. I have no idea. I've never found that reference, what that came from. The mill from 1811 is still missing, and the first mill here has been confused with the second mill. So all things are not true necessarily. And here is a palisade that was built to protect the fort, which doesn't exist. So you got to be very careful about what you're looking at. But it did tell us where Ox Pasture is now. So we now know where Ox Pasture is. And Robert Ingham, the president of the Old Saybrook Historical Society, decided to try to untangle this great big pile of stuff back in the 1990s. And he made this whole binder of information. He did a great job sorting out a lot of it, but he eventually got tired of the process and gave up. And in particular, he gave up trying to find Ox Pasture because he said, even though this Frank Stevenson reports seeing foundations for a mill off Trask Street, but Robert Ingham, he'd like proof because he doesn't believe it. He doesn't believe it could be built in the marsh. So that, of course, is just fighting words to us tide mill folks. So it's like, of course it could be built in the marsh. We just got to go find it. But it tells us to go look at Trask Street. So Trask Street is not someplace I was familiar with in Old Saybrook, but there it is, right there. Here is Ox Pasture. It basically is this whole area that's drained by the back river. And here is, by the way, here's Oyster River, and the Oyster River Tide Mill was right there at Route 1. So now we know where Ox Pasture is. We've been told that there was something, some kind of foundation visible at the end of Trask Street. So we take Trask Street down to the end, and we come to this very strange looking, unusually straight part of the river. And again, from many years of looking at maps, like whenever you see straight lines in tide marshes, it's man-made. So there it is. And when you zoom in, it's like, yeah, that is definitely man-made. That is not a natural river channel. Those have been cut into the marsh, and they connect to land. That is not a natural stream bed. So this is a very good place to go look for a tide mill, foundation of a tide mill. So I did, but not yet. I wanted to get a little bit more data. So I went to the aerial photo database, and the oldest aerial photograph available for the area is from 1934. And that's a really important date because it's before the hurricane of 38. And so a lot of the features are still in existence. And here is this photograph, and you can see those canals or channels were even narrower and straighter back then, and that there are very specific constriction areas or choke points. And you can see also dredge piles. So this is definitely man-made, and there was definitely something there. And then also there's this funny little shape here, which does not look natural to me either. It looks like it might be some kind of wharf, and there are these paths leading to it. This is kind of marshy area. This is farmland. This is all farmland up here. This would have been all croplands. So this is fitting, this is appropriate. This is like the kind of thing we'd be looking for. You build your mill near your grain, because that way you don't have to move it so much. And we've got water power here. and a control mechanism. And if you go there, this is what you see. This is what I call the canal right here. And a constriction A is right here, B is over there, and C is right there. And if you walk, so this, I'm standing on the end of Trask Street right now. I'm just looking. So this is like 30 feet away to the bucket right here. And if you walk out to the bucket and look down, that's what you see. There's our mill. So what basically had been disappeared from the historic record for 250 years, all you have to do is figure out Ox Pasture, Trask Street, end of Trask Street, look down, there it is. From talking with you guys and walking around Maine with Bud, I've learned that this is the classic thing to look for. Timbers lined on the inside with vertical planking, and the same thing over here. This is a sluice. This is a water-controlled mechanism. This is roughly 2 feet wide, so they're channeling water through here towards the mill. And there's also stuff visible in the creek here. This looks like some kind of gate mechanism. There's another thing over here, and X marks the spot because there's something really neat over there, which is, look at this. These are hand-hewn timbers with mortises cut in them. And all I'm doing is I'm doing this. I'm looking right down at the end of the thing. So what was lost for 250 years it can be found by just pulling on that thread and looking down. So all this was very exciting, and I decided I wanted to do something about it. So I convinced some friends to come and bring their fun toys. So this is Nancy Byrne, who lives in my town in Chester, and she was on the verge of retirement. She's a surveyor, but she had a brand new aerial drone. I said, Nancy, you want to come play? And she's got all the best toys, and so she did, and I put her to work. As you can see, I'm a gentleman. She can go first out into the mud. She set up these, these are targets. So she's calibrating her equipment. So she's put out half a dozen of these things all over the marsh so that she can get a quarter-inch accuracy on her GPS aerial surveys from her drone. And likewise, she's going down into the marsh to do vertical calibration as well. So I'm getting really high-tech, really high-quality work for this little side project. And this is one of the first images she took. That's me over there. This is an aerial looking down. And you can see there's that sluice. Timber on the side, lined in the middle, filled with rubble. Very clearly filled with rubble. This is not natural. These are cobbles. And then timber across, some other stuff here, some other stuff here. So this was all lots of fun to find this so quickly. And again, pointing out what we're seeing. We think that this might be some kind of a corner post over here, which would be very cool. And clearly, this is in the middle of the channel. So, you know, this was built over that channel, or the things were built, the channels were dug to it, but this is not on the side. This is not a shipwreck. This is not a barn. This is something that is controlling water. So, convinced Nancy got the bug. She said, let's come back, do another survey. The first thing we did was some core sampling. So this is a 2.5 or 3 inch aluminum pipe. She's putting a sleeve in it. And we're going to drive this thing into the mud to see what we can find. That's me driving it into the mud, and Nancy pulling it. I'm taller, so I drive it in. She's shorter, so she pulls it out. And then we see what we've got. And you slice it open. And what was interesting is, okay, when you slice it open, you can see that the top here is all roots, and it goes to all sand right here in a 2-foot distance. So we're hitting fill. This is not natural. It's been filled area. So again, evidence of man-made construction. It should be 8, 10, 12 feet of marsh mud and roots. Again, all of these things are adding to a belief that, yes, we think we found the shipman tide mill from 1774, because that's about right. That would be about the right amount of stuff that has been built up since then. Because sea level has risen, and when sea level rises, you get more and more sediment on top, so that's just about the right level for what we would expect to find. So Nancy then brought her boat and her sonar equipment, and we went out at high tide and surveyed the whole thing so we could see what's underneath. And then she started to build things, put things together. So this is the first teaser that she sent me. This is what they call a photo mosaic. So this is all kinds of multiple images combined and put into a perspective view. And you can see there's her pickup truck. And that's the end of Trask Street. So we walked from there to there, and we looked down, and boom, there was the mill. And so all the activity really is right here. But you can see there are these other constrictions that we're also going to look at. And now this is what she started to build. This is the combination, I wish this were a little clearer, LiDAR images, which are laser-based, highly accurate topographic maps. So they're showing us the contours. And that's this stuff here. And you can see here's a contour line, and here's a contour line. So that is a foot different from there. So this is basically flat, okay? There's essentially no topography here. It's just flat. And then if you look carefully, you can also see there are contour lines in the creek, and so that's water depths. And we will zoom in here. So here's the north end of the creek. There's Nancy's pickup truck again. Here is our structure. Here's a cross-sectional view that you'll see in a moment. And again, here's our constriction A, constriction B. There's some kind of shallow spot here you can see. And then there's something going on down here at constriction C. And this is, quote, natural color. So this is May. The survey was in May, so basically not much grass is up yet. So it's just muddy and gray. And then you can also do enhanced colors so you can really get a better sense of the water depths. So this is the orange is shallow, the yellow is a little deeper, the deep blue is the deep blue water. And you can see that the canals are basically shallow, the river is deeper, as you would expect. There's a couple of really deep spots here where the water's coming together that makes sense. It's often true that you get deep water on the outside of the curve because there's a scouring effect. So that makes sense over there. And it would make sense some here, but this looks a little odd. It doesn't look like the right shape. So if we zoom in on, we'll zoom in on that in a minute. Here's a closer view of the structure. So there's our sluice. Here are these pieces that are out in the creek. There's a cross section you can see. So she's going to take it across there, and she's got this set up so that we can look at mean high. This is the tide range from mean, lower, low water. There are 2 low tides per day. This is the average of them. The mean higher high water, and it's different over time. So in 1738, it was at this range. Now it's at this range, okay? And if we go to this one, which is probably the closest one, 1700s, basically that puts us right at the tidal range. So that puts our structure at the right place for a tide mill. So again, we're looking at, can it be something else? That's the question. And we won't know the answer for that for a while yet, but we have clearly a structure that's looks like it's meant to control water, and it's at the right level to control water as well. So now we're going to go look at that thing that might be a wharf on the other side of the river. And as we look closely, it's hard to tell what's going on up here at constriction C, but at this wharf, look at this shape. That looks very, very not natural, again, straight lines. And that's what was this in 34, before now looks like this. And if we zoom on in even more, it's like, oh yeah, okay, that is definitely, those are vertical walls, right angles. That is a man-made wharf, no question about it. So, so we're getting a lot of evidence that there was man-made constructions here that have long gone. So I kept on figuring, it was like, what else is buried under there? And so I was talking, you know, sometimes we do high tech, sometimes we do low tech. I bought myself a $20 soil probe. This is a steel rod with a handle on the end, and I shoved it into the mud until I hit something. And if you do that on a pattern, you learn something. So if you go down like this and it just keeps going, there's nothing there. If you go like this and it goes ting, you've hit rock. You go like that, it goes ting, that's a shell. And if you go like ting, or thud, that's wood. It works. That's what I could see. Those flags are all where I hit something, and they're all at about 2 feet down. Versus that meter-long stick or soil probe shoved into the ground right there, I didn't hit anything at all. So again, this is a way of figuring out what's underneath this mud that we've got. But one of the things I realized is that while these flags, these are little pieces of wire with a flag on the top, are useful for keeping track of where you shove your soil probe, they have a limit, because where the hell is that? Where's that flag? Because you're looking at it from the side, you're not looking at it from above. And what I really wanted to do is I wanted to map this. I'm lazy. I wanted Nancy to come back with her drone and map it for me once I had done this. So I went to the lab, which is my garage, and I made an improved target, which is a yogurt top with this pattern scribbled on it with a magic marker, with a flag shoved through it, and then we use those. And so we can shove that into the ground, and Nancy can fly her drone, and she can spot it exactly. So we can map all these patterns, because patterns are useful. And all of this is cool, but I've learned that sometimes you just do things, sometimes you have to ask permission, and this is like, well, we should probably ask permission for this. Because I wanted to raise this timber, because this timber looks very cool to me. Now I'm really getting into archaeology. I'm not just, you know, scouting, this is really archaeology. I convinced the state archaeologist to come. And last week, we did it. We did an excavation, and it was timed so that we could be at low tide, so we could wander into the creek. This is where we're talking about. Because this is Google or Earth, so if you know, that's it right there. And we would have basically the afternoon of April 15th to go in and explore. So that's what we did. You know, you spend some time getting organized. That's Ted from the Historical Society. That's Nick, the archaeologist. That's me. This is my friend Mark Yucknat. He's got a metal detector, because one of the other things we wanted to do is, if it's an old structure, there's probably not a lot of metal in the structure. But if there is, we want to find it. Again, it's all clues to help us understand what we're dealing with and what's where. And there's my target, which he's going to shove into the ground. And the problem is he didn't find anything. There's no metal in this structure as far as we can tell based on metal detector. And that metal detector can detect a pin, a thumbtack a foot down, or a cannon 6 feet down. So it's a high quality metal detector, and we found nothing. Again, negative result, helpful nonetheless. But this is what that's the structure we were looking at in the water, so I labeled everything. I did this after our survey. I should have done it beforehand, because it would have been a whole lot easier, because we were out in the stream, as you'll see, with tape measures and wetsuits and trying to measure things. And we were doing this all by feel, because you can see we stirred up all this sediment. So, you know, you're down in here, sometimes up to your neck, trying to feel your way around with measuring tapes. And that corner post that we thought, well, it turned out to be a crab pot. So you don't know until you go out there and look, and then you find stuff. So it was a beautiful day. This is April 15th. It was 75 degrees. It was just fabulous. We had a great time. And eventually we got around to lifting the timber. And it is a very cool piece of timber. You can see there's a vertical mortise here. There's a horizontal mortise here. And there's another vertical mortise over here, but it's broken. So we lifted this timber, and there you can see it. Again, this is the vertical mortise in. The timber is axe cut. The butt end is not cut with a saw, it's cut with an axe, and the top has been smoothed out with an adze. So this is all totally handmade. And the mortises are all chisel cut. There are no drill holes in this. Even by 1800, they would be using a drill into the corners. There's no drill holes on any of these mortises. You can see their chisel marks right here, right here, right here, and the same for over there. And then there's also a tenon or tree nail. Mortise is the cut, a tenon is what goes into it, and a tree nail or trunnel is what pins it together. And there's a tree nail hole across one of these things. So it's a really interesting piece of wood. And we actually did a schematic of it. This is all, again, last week. It still had bark on it. It's red oak, probably local red oak. And there were also Teredo shipworm holes in it, which are not native to this area, but occasionally we get invaded and then they live for a while and then they die off. But these things are a half-inch diameter. You could stick your finger in them. So a really interesting piece of history. And one of the volunteers has volunteered to pay for the preservation of it. And there's a chemical process that takes about a year that the Historical Society is probably going to do.
Mark,
yes?
Since you have a timber with bark on it,
Mm-hmm.
you do have an opportunity also.
Yes. So this section right here, the last 3 inches, has been cut off and sent to the lab for radiocarbon dating. And if the Historical Society decides to preserve it, then it'll probably get cut somewhere right around here, probably right there. And we'll do slices and preserve the slices and also send it for dendrochronology. Dendrochronology is tree ring dating. So it's not just counting back the number of rings, just figuring out how old the tree was when it was cut, but comparing that to a database of lots of different tree rings and then figuring out, oh, that pattern equals this set of years. So in theory, between radiocarbon dating and the tree ring dating, you could potentially get down to 30-year time range, maybe 1 year, but it all depends. So at the moment, it's all wrapped in plastic in my garage. And hopefully the Historical Society will figure out all their logistics and so forth and take it out of my garage. So that's all what's happened, and that leaves us with a whole batch of questions. But one of the things it says, the way the mill was described was it was built at Ox Pasture Dam. And so you can read that a couple different ways. One way is to say it was built at a pre-existing known location. The dam pre-existed. That raises the possibility that it could be associated not with John Shipman's 1774 dam that we think we found at the end of Trask Street, but it might be 1691. It might be Stephen Post, who started building one in 1649, but died, and he never finished it. So it raises the possibility that we're looking at something from 1600s rather than 1700s. This is where it goes to the dating issue. And if so, okay, maybe we can see a dam or remnants of a dam that we have some clues. Maybe this line right here is just a slight rise in the topography that was since wiped away, probably by the 38 hurricane, and maybe a dam went all the way across here. And that makes some sense because you're surrounded by cornfields. You've got a big mill pond. If you dam the whole thing, you'd have lots of power. And maybe also the stream was too big. That would be 40 or 50 feet across, that you couldn't handle the power. And your dam blew out. And then it was left, and then someone came back 100 years later and built John Shipman's mill. So
Which way does the water?
Flows out this direction. So this is dry land here. This is dry land over here. So if they dammed across here, they'd have a huge mill pond. Again, this is, I should have put a scale here. This is 30 to 40, maybe even 50 feet across right here. So that's a pretty big dam for 1600s. That's frankly too big to be successful in 1600s. They would not have made that big of an investment. But the advantage of putting a mill here and putting a dam and a mill here is that you have water access. So you can this whole area up here is all grain fields, so grain can come to you that way. This whole area over on the right-hand side is all grain fields. It can come to you that way, and it can come in or go out by way of the back river out to Long Island Sound. So just as you were saying, the coastal traffic, there it is. You're, a quarter mile up this little creek, but that creek is plenty deep to bring a coasting boat up. And that's clearly a wharf. So if they built something this big, they were intended to move something that big. So it's an interesting question. So this is, again, you pull a thread, where does it lead? It may lead us back even further. Instead of just 1774, we may now be into the 1600s. So is that the dam? I don't know. We're going to have to find out. Who built it? When? How was it built? And then there's also this interesting idea that the particular, was the tide mill a bidirectional tide mill? This canal is pretty shallow. And if you put a paddle wheel style wheel right there, that might make sense for a bidirectional tide mill. Most were not. Only from what I can tell, about 2% of tide mills were bidirectional. Most of them were not successful. So that might also explain why Shipman's, if Shipman built a new and peculiar mill as a bidirectional mill in 1774, if that's what we're looking at right here, it could be that he built this bidirectional mill right there. Tide goes in, it spins one way, tide goes out, it spins the other way. But most of those bidirectional mills were not successful. And so maybe that explains why Shipman's mill basically disappears from the historical record. It was new and different, and it didn't work very well. So it was dismantled, at least everything above ground, and taken away. And that's why we have a very well-preserved foundation, but nothing above it. So those are the continuing questions. And I open it up to the floor for questions and comments and suggestions about what it could be, how to go about further discussion. Anybody want to join the play? Yeah, that structure is at most 20 feet square. Yeah, but they were. Early mills were little mills. The Pontrico's mill was about 24 feet square. So, yeah, right. So here's an idea. Somebody in the 1690s built a dam all the way across, built a wharf here, built a mill here, and something happened to it. 1774, John Shipman says, I'm going to build, instead of rebuilding this big infrastructure that blew out, I'm going to build something little in a different fashion. I'm going to dig these canals, and I'm going to put in a bidirectional mill here. And it doesn't work very well either.
So you wouldn't need a mill pond or a dam.
Exactly, right. So there are advantages, but there are disadvantages that it's just not very efficient. The other thing is that the sluice that we were measuring here, it's only 2 feet wide and 1.5 feet deep. You were seeing the paddle wheels that you have out on Long Island. They're 8, 10, 12 feet wide. This is only 2 feet. So there may be more stuff buried underneath that marsh that we don't know about yet. But you could run a mill off of a 2 foot by 1.5 foot deep trough, absolutely. But that's not a lot of power given the speed of the current, given the tide range that you're working with. So you could do it, but from what I know, it would not seem to be very successful. And again, that might explain why it disappeared. Yeah.
If you have that, where the letter D is, would you speculate in your mind?
Right. So again, this is dry land right here. This is essentially dry land over here, a little bit of marsh too. But if you went from here to here, that might have been a dam in 1600s. There's something right here, but it doesn't show up on the modern sonar image. And likewise, you can see there's something right here, and there's something right here. There's 2 stakes in the mud that might be pilings, but they're just there. It's not. We took a metal detector around them. Didn't find anything, couldn't find anything across the creek. So that could be a dock, could be a tide gate of some kind. We don't know yet. So it's a process of uncovering layers of interest. So yeah.
So back when you first went out there,
This is state land. So that makes this process easier. But again, we got permission from the Inland Wetlands Commission, the Connecticut, Old Saybrook from the state, Long Island Sound Task Force, the EEP, from the Historic Preservation Office. So this is all done under permits under Nick's authority. Because again, as soon as I decided I wanted to raise that timber, it's like, it becomes a different conversation. And that's why it's taken 3.5 years up in Canada, because it's all these same processes, but we're dealing with a 30-foot tidal range. We're dealing with private land, utility company land, provincial land, federal land, and native rights as well. So you add all that together, plus me saying that the 200 years of historians got it, 100 years of historians got it wrong, takes a long time. So, thank you.